Good. Real briefly, Colonel Brown, thank you so much for that presentation. I think you're being a little bit, you shine more than you're letting on. The Joint Standardization Board concept by the Mobile Electric Power Systems folks has been taken to a whole new level. They've actually codified the JSB, Joint Standardization Board concept, within their latest DoD instruction that was just put out the year before last, replacing their directive. So they've actually taken the concept of coalition of the willing for JSBs into an actual required attendance for developing requirements, discussing acquisition decisions, and other things. We may be trying to do the similar type of thing in the next JSB to present, the Expeditionary Shelters and Basing Equipment. Now, let me just introduce you to that real briefly here. We've only got about 20 minutes each. By the way, what really, you were so quick, Colonel Brown, that I want to mention that the MEPS folks, they deploy around the world, on a regular basis to set up power distribution systems or generation systems, whether it's microgrid in CENTCOM AOR or tactical power generation in Afghanistan, NORTHCOM, US PACOM, US AFRICOM, all those areas they deployed to last year. And we get a report annually from them that talks about everything they're doing for standardization. And it's pretty good work. Okay, on to the next Joint Standardization Board, which is about shelters and basing equipment. I'm not going to give you too much because Mr. G, Melvin G, is going to present that to you, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but can you imagine all the different numbers and types of tents and shelters we'd have across DoD if we didn't try to standardize on that, and then other basing equipment? It would be a logistics nightmare. It's still already hard with our standardization that we're doing. Enforcement is a big key, but we're working at it. And Melvin G is the chief of the Engineered Systems Division of Soldier Sustainment Directorate and of the Combat Capabilities Development Command Soldier Center. He's been involved in development and integration of tactical shelters since 1987. He has actually been awarded a patent for the modular shelter system and continues to develop and push concepts for improving setup and teardown times of command posts. He's a graduate of Texas A&M University with a mechanical engineering degree. So without further ado, please take it away, Melvin G.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. You could have taken much more time if you wish. I had no objections to that. Anyway, I thank you for inviting me to give this briefing. And today I'm just going to give a quick overview, a little bit about our history, our organization, mission accomplishments, and upcoming events. Next slide, please. The Joint Standardization Board for Expeditionary Shelters and Basing Equipment, which we lovingly call JSB, really had its origins back in 1975. Back in 1975, there were well over 100 different types of rigid wall shelters in the field, each with their own logistics train, each of them having costs associated with it. It was just becoming unwieldy. DLA had to buy parts for a bazillion different types of shelters. And so the Secretary of Defense issued a directive to all of these services and said, okay, get together and rationalize this and get this thing down to something reasonable. So in 1975, the chief of staffs of each of the armed forces came together and formed the Joint Committee for Tactical Shelters, which is called JCOTUS for short. Now, JCOTUS took those 100+ shelters, went through and found a small family of 21 shelters, which would fulfill 85 to 90% of the needs of the DoD. And so with all those shelters being rationalized down to 21, it became a much easier thing to manage. They became known as the DoD Standard Family of Shelters. And they've been fairly constant since 1975. There really hasn't been that many changes to the rigid wall shelter side. Back in '94, then we added tents to the mix. And then in 2006, we were approached to become a joint standardization board. And in 2009, a organization was stood up to deal with expeditionary basing equipment. And in 2012, it was thought maybe we could be combining contingency basing equipment into JSB-ESBE. And in 2015 through today, we've blended the two organizations together. The Joint Expeditionary Basing Working Group and JSB-ESBE were put together to form JSB. And in this last year, we came up with the charter, and this year we've finalized our operating procedures. Next slide, please. So as you can see, it's kind of hard to read if you're looking at a small screen. But we're broken down into two basic groups. At the head, you have the chair, which is Greg Saunders at this point. And then you have the executive officer who reports to the chair, which is me. Then it breaks down to two. We have groups of, at the top group are the voting members, and the bottom group are the associate and ad hoc members. The voting members are comprised of the four services, just as JSB-ESBE originally was. But these four services, the reps represent not only just shelters, shelter development, they also represent all the basing equipment. So it's across a wide swath of different technologies and equipment. Those that are associate members or ad hoc members range from ASALT, DLA, CASCOM, and different centers of excellence. So it can be quite a few. I mean, we could have well over 100 people participating if in any one meeting. We meet twice a year, generally April and October. April got canceled this year due to COVID. We were hoping to get to Alaska. We're going to have to push that off to next year, hoping that things get better. The meeting this month got pushed to next month, and that's all because of delays due to COVID. Next slide, please. Now, our primary mission is to reduce duplication, as we did at the very beginning. We're trying to get people to use standard equipment, because then there's standard procedures to repair. We have DLA would have a much simpler supply chain, and there's a lot of good things that can come out of standardization, as you know. And we're trying to provide a better forum for all the services to talk, so that we can make sure that we're all in sync, so that we don't duplicate our efforts in developing new shelters, that we don't, if we have procurements going on, it lets everyone know what's going on so that they can take advantage of those procurements. And if there's issues regarding fielding, we can all talk about those things as well. JSB-ESBE has always been a fairly close-knit group, as well as the Joint Expeditionary Basing Working Group. And the challenge has always been getting these two disparate groups to talk. Even once we combined, it took a while for us to actually get everybody synced up and talking together. And a lot of that is owed largely to my predecessor, Claudia Quigley, and her and her and now my action officer, Connie Miles. And I do wish, and I do extend any, if either one of them are listening, I want to extend my thanks to them. But they've spent a lot of time getting both groups to talk, to coordinate, to basically just share information with each other. And it's a tribute to their efforts that we are functioning like we should be now. Because it ultimately is all boils down person-to-person contact. You need to really have people sitting down, talking to each other, breaking bread, sharing a cup of coffee. Just they really need to talk and meld together as a team. And that's really been the biggest accomplishment over the last couple of years, is getting two disparate groups of people to actually sit down and talk to each other. Another example, more on the equipment side, is if we hadn't been talking to each other, this example I'm going to give you would never have been able to take place. For instance, I got a request from AFRICOM. They were having problems with bugs, of all things. They'd have these compounds, and they need to light the compounds from the guard tower so they can see what's going on either away from the compound or within the compound. And in Africa, the bugs are so attracted to the lights that it got so thick that they couldn't see into the compound. Heck, even the lights on top of the guard towers were being blocked by all the bugs, so they couldn't even see out from the guard towers. So they reached out to me to see if I had any solutions for them. And I found that LED lights do not have the same problems of attracting bugs. So I put them in contact with the Air Force, because the Air Force was working on LED-based lights for their airfields, for their billeting areas. And so I put them in contact, and they were able to get the information. And as far as I know, they obtained these lights, which are standard, and have had no problems since. At least they haven't complained to me about it. So that's one example of where having that person-to-person contact, because I would never have known about their lights, and I wouldn't have had the right contacts to do that, to get the information. Other things we've done, as I said, we finalized our standards. But we've also created an online catalog, which we expect to go live online before the end of the year. And one of the things that we also have to do is, if somebody wants to use a non-standard shelter, there's a waiver process. And so we've created a better way for them to submit a waiver. There's a fillable form that they can fill out and then submit to each of their service rep for adjudication within JACOTUS. Next slide. An example of some of the stuff that we do talk about is in our last meeting, which was October of last year. We talked about the priorities that each service had regarding their needs for shelters or shelter developments. And during that talk, we've had discussions. The Air Force was talking about the F-35 program, where they needed a debriefing facility, and they're using standard shelters to provide the debriefing facility. And their concern was the lack of procurement of the standard shelters, so we had to bring that up to the board to let it, and the JSB, so that we were all aware of their concerns regarding procurement. We also are dealing with issues of procurement of non-standard shelters. It's too easy for field units to reach out and buy a non-standard shelter based upon an NSN, which seems to be like a magic number that makes it seem like the shelters are safe and everything, but when that's really not the case. So we had to bring that issue up to DLA, and we're trying to resolve that issue now. We talked about shelter transportability, which you'd be surprised how many people don't think about the importance of being able to transport the shelters, making sure they fit on the aircraft, make sure that they can fit through rail tunnels or underneath bridges. It's kind of seems like that should be a very simple and an obvious thing that people have to worry about, but a lot of people don't think about it. Then they buy non-standard shelters that aren't transportable, and then they're stuck at home, and they can't be deployed. For instance, the best example I could think of was back at the opening stages of Desert Storm. The CENTCOM wanted a command post, so they paid Raytheon to integrate a whole bunch of shelters for them. Raytheon went and made changes to the shelter which made them untransportable, and when they went to get transported, they felt that we have a 4-star general, he'll get us on an airplane, and even the 4-star general didn't have enough oomph to get it transported, so they had to go and get a temporary waiver to get these things transported by ship, and then once they arrived in country, they could no longer be transported back home. So I don't know what ever happened to those, but we were trying to drive home the need for making sure that people think about transportability. There's a need with concerns now with Arctic extremes, and so we talked about the need for shelters that will survive in the Arctic environment, and then we ended the meeting by talking about ECU performance requirements in preparation for a new ECU buy. Next slide. The final thing that we're trying to do is next planned meeting, which will be virtual, which will be next month. We're gathering new topics of interest to all the different members. And finally, we're going to be posting our catalog online. If there's no questions, I will turn it back to Lloyd to introduce our next briefer. Thank you very much for your time and attention.